Welcome back to another episode of Risk Check Podcast. The dynamic duo is back together again. Allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Perri.
And I'm Rashawn.
And this is another installment of WCP Weekly. Today, we got a special episode for you. Sort of a state of the marketplace episode. Many of you know, our viewers and listeners, we are sponsored by Bezel. It's a company that's near and dear to us. And every so often they issue a report sort of based on the data that they collect from their website with sales and requests from clients and just general client engagement. So we're going to get into that because there's some really cool information that I think they've given us access to. And you can visit them at GetBezel on Instagram and check out the report for yourself. They did do a post, and then that links to the website where you could read it at length. Some useful stuff. But before we get into that, obviously, we have to have our honorary wrist check. Such as tradition, we start with the man sitting across from me. Mr. Smith, what's on the wrist?
So I'm wearing a very special timepiece, as they all are. Tried and true, trusty iCopod.
Woo!
Yes, wearing the dual pod, time only, beautiful midnight blue dial, beautiful flying saucer case. Doesn't really have a bezel, but it just has like this unison kind of display of time.
Sure.
Which I really, really enjoy. It's very industrial, and which would make sense from, Mark Newson and Johnny Ive kind of putting their minds together to create this masterpiece. Well, more of Johnny Ive stepped in, obviously, with the Apple Watch, yeah. But just more of Mark Newson and Oliver Ike.
Yeah.
I'd say them creating the iCopod, and then it translating to the wristwatches that we see today.
Yeah, no, it's a great piece. I love the shape. Feels like a flying saucer on the wrist.
Yeah.
Feels futuristic, but it's also familiar. I'm a big fan of Mark Newson's designs. I was a fan of the iCopod for a long time. Still have never owned one, which is crazy. I should get one in the collection at some point, but I think I have trouble kind of figuring out where and which direction I want to go. But I'm certain that at some point, maybe I'll do like a complicated piece. I did like the piece that Jan had when he was here, the gold chrono, which I thought was pretty fire. I would like one of those cause pieces.
Yeah.
But those are big money right now, so I'm not so sure about that. But it looks good on the wrist, man. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Works with the fit.
It does. No, for sure. Yeah. I got on a new watch. I didn't think I would wear this today, actually, but when I walked out the house, I was just like, oh, let me throw this on. And I think I actually forgot that we were shooting because I wanted to hold on to this and maybe break it out later. But I am wearing a new timepiece. Not really new. It's vintage. It's another AP.
Yes.
I'm wearing an 80s QP AP.
Nice.
Yellow gold. 36 millimeter. It's got a JLC movement. I think it's the 2122 caliber. And no, man, I love it. I did miss the 5140 perpetual I had, but for some reason it just felt like a lot of watch and always kind of made me nervous. I don't have the same feeling with this one. Maybe it's because the presence on the wrist is a little more smaller, feels a little more contained. And it's like super duper thin. I threw it on this sort of like green woven rubber strap. I was going for and inspired by the AP boxes.
Yeah.
That emerald green color with the gold lettering.
Yeah.
And no, I love it. It's and you know what? I have to say also, probably next to the new AP perpetual calendars, where everything is manipulated through the crown, one of the easiest perpetuals to set.
I can see that.
It makes a lot of sense the way that they have this kind of laid out. So it's only got 3 pushers. One moves the moon phase, controls the moon phase. That's at 4 o'clock. You've got another one between 9 and 8 and that'll change your date. And then the one at the top moves both the day and the date. And so if you can imagine, when you're setting, you kind of look and see what day it is, and you get the day and the month to sort of match up, and then you could flip through the days.
Yeah.
And so it actually makes it really simple, because the way that it orients you to use it, I feel like it makes more sense. Whereas like other perpetual calendars, you got to like pull out the manual and make sure that you're doing it in a certain order. It's just like, it's a lot.
It is.
But I think, somehow, some way that speaks to, it speaks to JLC and what they were able to do with that caliber. And this was during a time when AP, I believe, owned JLC. So I guess you could kind of consider it in-house, but in terms of developing calibers, this is where JLC as a company has always and still shines.
Yes.
But I like it a lot. I'm enjoying it very much.
Yeah, I have to agree. Before we get into the thick of things, I definitely want to add the fact that you're truly like an AP guy. You've said it, but it's now more prevalent.
It's settling in.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure what that says about me. I think it says good things. I like AP.
I think AP is great.
Yeah, I like AP. The brand has really grown on me, especially since getting my allocation. And I've always liked the brand, but now I'm like really digging in and learning a lot, doing the history. And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying talking to and speaking with other AP collectors. I've since reconnected with a mutual friend, Aaron, who is really big into AP. And when I shared this timepiece with him, he sent me a whole bunch of material on sort of the history of this piece and this model, and just some great reading material to kind of look up and get educated on it. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, let's talk about something every watch collector can relate to. When you're on the hunt for the piece, you slid into DMs, combed through the forums, maybe even hit up a friend of a friend, and still nothing.
And that's where Bezel comes in. It's not just another marketplace. It's where tech meets tradition. Whether you're after a Rolex sub or independent grail, Bezel has tens of thousands of authenticated listings waiting for you. And if the watch isn't listed yet, no worries. Just add the model to your wish list and Bezel hits you with real-time notifications the moment something drops.
And for those of you who don't have time to obsess over listings 24/7, Bezel's got a concierge team that can source the watch for you. They basically take all the stress out of the process so you can just enjoy the watch on your wrist.
Plus, for sellers, guarantee sales in just a few days. Thanks to the auction feature, it's a win-win, whether you're buying or selling.
So if you're ready to make your next move in this watch game, hit up Bezel, and trust me, you'll wish you'd done it sooner. All right, so the Bezel Report.
Yeah, I like this. I like the title.
So there's a lot of information that they've accumulated, and they've been doing this for a while. It's something that I think a lot of people kind of look forward to. They've kind of owned it and made it their thing. For those of you that don't know what Bezel is, it's an online marketplace for watches. We have a great relationship with them. And essentially, and what I would encourage anyone listening and watching to do now is to go back and look at the episode that we recently did with Quade Walker, who's the CEO of Bezel, and where we really got into the thick of it in terms of the story, where they are, where they're going, but also how they envision Bezel from a client perspective and a seller's perspective. And there was a lot of interesting things that were shared. And the website has really kicked it up a bunch. They've got, I mean, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $1 billion in terms of value of product listed on their site. I think post launching auctions, obviously it's exploded. We hear more and more people talking about Bezel. I think we have something to do with that as well. But people are loving it. I find the website really fun. I'm always kind of searching through listings and seeing what people are posting. I'm looking at the auction, which is a lot of fun to kind of see where things are coming in at and where they're selling at. And they've got a really good thing going. So a lot of people are using the site, and so now this is giving them access to consumer habits, but also seller habits. And so there's a lot of information to share. I think what I'd like to get into first is the authentication and rejection rates.
Yes.
And the reason why is I think this kind of paints a picture in terms of what people are trying to sell, their incentives for trying to sell it. It also gives a really great depiction into how important this process is from a consumer perspective, right? And the guardrails that Bezel have sort of put up to aid in that respect, to make sure that they're delivering sort of a world-class experience. And so the numbers are in.
Yes.
And so this is all for the first half of the year. So we're 6 months in. We're going by calendar year. And similar to what we spoke about, they have a 27% rejection rate.
Yes.
Which seems really high.
Very.
In addition to that, 38% of what's listed is selling for more. 38% of what was rejected was listed for more than 10K.
Yes.
Now, the biggest culprits here, now obviously when they're doing their rejections, there's a matter of condition that's important, right? So I think in many cases, it's really just about, is the watch as described? Is it in the condition you described? Is it in sellable condition? All fair. What's interesting is, and what they've noted is, some of the biggest culprits are counterfeiters.
Yes.
Which I think is a really interesting conversation, that counterfeiters are trying to pass off these watches through websites, listings like Bezel.
Yes.
Right? And what that says a couple of things to me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I think you got something you want to share.
Well, so, because this is what I enjoy, but simultaneously it burns me up because I've shared a lot of things on Instagram in terms of like counterfeit watches actually passing an authentication process.
Yes.
And people kind of shopping for the better price.
Right.
To be respectful, these things are not cheap. And if someone wants to save a couple $1,000s, like, I respect it. But also,
you respect what?
I respect you. I respect that you want to be price conscious.
Sure.
What burns me up is the fact that you will go to less credible marketplaces to get the better price. So you get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for.
I think when you look at trusted marketplaces like Bezel, or even, ADs that do sell pre-owned product, you say, man, this is higher than where I can get from other places. But you have to understand that's the cost of doing business.
It's a fair point.
It's just the way that it has to be. And the reason why these watches that are counterfeit, people feel comfortable enough to send them through, is because half of these guys don't even know that their watch is fake,
So true.
One of my favorite lines from Jay is, y'all spend real money on fake watches, shockingly.
Yeah, shockingly.
The most terrible gut-wrenching part of this is you saving 5, 6, 7, 8K on a watch, but you just spent 20,000 and the whole watch was compromised.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool. So I don't want to spend 25,000 on a watch. So I'm gonna spend 20, and then you go ahead and you just got for 20 instead of bucking up for the 5.
You can't even get the 20 back.
You can't even get the 20 back.
You can't even get 10 of that back. No, I mean, that's an excellent point. And I think it's two. I see it two ways. I think it's interesting that people, I think to some degree you're right? no, let me not say to some degree. You are 100% thorough and correct. Where I'm going with this is, I think the interesting part is that yes, people are trying to sell their watches and discovering that they may be inauthentic. But I'm also curious how many people, knowing that they're fakes, may be sending it in, seeing if it can pass. Because I'm sure that's part of it as well.
Yes, but I mean, I guess with technology now, like, man, you
have like super clones and stuff out
carbon
there.
copies.
And you know, what's great about this report, we're not going to get that crazy into this section by getting into all the details on what they're looking for. But I do encourage anyone watching and listening to go and check this report out, because they do lay out some examples of what they've discovered in terms of counterfeit or modified watches. And I think that part was like really, really interesting, because it shows you that Bezel's doing their due diligence and is incredibly thorough, you know, not wanting to list anything that they are uncertain about on their website. The other thing that I found interesting, because they gave us some charts that we'll share, is the rejections by brand. And I think this says two things that I think are interesting, right? I from my perspective, obviously, the brand that has the most rejection is A, going to be the most in demand, but B, probably going to be the easiest to fake.
Yes,
And so that is Rolex.
of course.
And Rolex, no shade towards Rolex, but Rolex represented 57% of what was rejected in the first half of the year. That's huge.
That's huge.
That's huge. Right behind them, and I thought this was interesting, was Omega, apparently doubling year over year from 5% to 10%.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't want to make the argument that speaks to how easily Omega can be faked, though I wouldn't imagine it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But I think what is more interesting about that is something that you constantly remind us of when you talk about the best value you get from a commercially available watch, and you always prize and champion the Omega Speedmaster. To me, what it shows is that Omega as a brand is actually on the right trajectory in terms of customer awareness, right? They're growing. People are becoming more aware of them. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was interesting, and it could be taken a couple of different ways, AP is not represented on this list.
No.
What do you think is going on there?
You know what? I have to genuinely think.
And we know that there are counterfeit APs.
There are, but I'll tell you, so I'm glad you said that, because you could spot a fake AP from a mile away.
You can.
Yes, we can. I think for the untrained eye, I think you could spot a fake Omega. You could spot a fake Rolex. I think you can, for the reasons being, the design language is very distinct in those pieces that if something's off, you can't tell. I mean, you can tell. For you know, Omega and Rolex. When it comes to AP, because the materials and, you know, just their layout in terms of, like, the biggest giveaway for fake APs is usually like the bridge, right?
Sure.
The balance wheel.
Yeah.
Like,
especially on the skeleton pieces.
on the skeleton pieces.
They're so bad. I mean, but you do have to have a trained eye for that, because so essentially what you're talking about is the finishing.
Yes.
The finishing is always a dead giveaway.
Yes.
On an AP, because AP is known for incredible finishing. And I also think that there's something to do with maybe price there.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's a lot easier to pass off Rolexes and Omegas, because there's a lot of product that are within a certain price threshold, right? And we're talking about 38% being around $10,000.
Yeah.
Right. Versus where, you know, an AP, if you're gonna fake any AP, it's gonna be a Royal Oak.
Yes.
And it's gonna resell for anywhere from 40 to 50 and above, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
So the chances of it being more scrutinized are probably higher. And I would imagine counterfeiters don't feel as comfortable trying to get those through a place like Bezel. I also imagine because of the it being as price prohibitive, you know, if you're trying to get one over on someone, it's going to be a red flag if it's moderately priced.
Yeah.
When you know that it commands like a very high price tag.
Yeah.
Right. This is like a god tier like watch company. And so from a consumer perspective, even if you're not as knowledgeable, there really is a lot of red flags on the way. When you mentioned talking about sort of identifying fake watches, I do think it's important to share, just because I want to share.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being a little petty, but I think what one of my biggest pet peeves, just in general,
Yeah.
is when people wear fake watches and think people can't tell.
Yes.
And let me just send a message out there. If you've ever been around me personally,
Yes.
and you've worn a fake watch from a major brand,
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah. I gotta tell a funny story because this literally happened to us like last week.
It did, but you can't share where we
No,
were.
I won't share where we were. But you text me, it was like, look, and I was like, yo, this watch is fake. It was like so bad, and like, I think for the gentleman that I would like to think that he probably, because he was very prideful of the watch, and he seemed like a decent guy, so it was like he might have got.
I don't see how you get. I mean, I'll share what this gentleman was wearing. I won't share anything else.
Yeah.
This gentleman was wearing a 5712
Yes.
Patek Philippe Nautilus.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, there's not that many places to get a fake 5712 Nautilus. So
Diamond District.
Sorry. You might be right. I don't spend any time there, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I hope to God that didn't happen, but it is a thing, right? And if you are wearing and you think people can't tell, I'm telling you they can tell. I personally just view it as it's not my place to tell you.
Yes.
And so I don't say anything if I don't know you.
Yeah.
But trust me, I saw it.
Yes.
I saw it. It was fake.
It was fake.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, I do feel bad because there is, the consideration that, someone may have got.
Yeah.
And that sucks, but I don't know. You might know. And then what's the appropriate setting to tell you? Do I pull you aside and say, hey man, I just want to let you know your watch is fake? You might be like, oh, this guy's a hater because of what. I leave it alone altogether.
Yeah. Well, so the reason why I feel like he might have got was because we were in a group where it's like there's so many people in different industries, and it was like, oh, like here are the watch guys, and he was like, oh, check this out. Like he was like very prideful about it. It'd be one thing if you're like, these are the watch guys, and you'd be like, oh.
I mean, the minute his wrist went up, I was like, no.
Yeah. Like, but he like
that bezel was like Goodyear tire thick.
Oh yeah, it was
crazy.
It was crazy. It was like deep dish pizza.
It was. Yeah, he said that. It was deep dish pizza.
But the thing about it was like he was very prideful about it, and he happened to know a bit about watches.
I didn't get to talk to him very much.
Yeah, you were already turned off.
Yeah,
but he knew a bit, so that's where like I was kind of like, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's not intentional, because he was like really out and open about it. And I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but I do think it's important to mention, just for people listening, that you might be able to pass it with many people, but when you're in front of watch people, particularly someone like myself and Rashawn, we actually handle so many watches on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
We know how these pieces look. We know what they feel like. We know what they feel like on the wrist. We know what they look like from a distance. Mm-hmm. We know.
Yeah.
And we know almost immediately.
Yeah.
Even without, I mean, like you said, can see it from across the room. That thing's a Fugazi. So I just wanted to mention that because I know that's something that, and I've seen people, whether it's in watch group chats or at events, pull out fake watches, and I'm just like, I don't know about you. All right, let's be real. Buying watches can be a little stressful. You're navigating through a sea of listings, wondering if that mint condition piece is really mint, hoping you're not about to drop some serious cash on something sketchy.
Into Bezel. These guys built a platform where every watch goes through an authentication process. We're talking old school watchmakers who know their stuff, checking every detail. They even smell the papers. And no, I'm not kidding.
And here's the kicker. Bezel isn't just for seasoned collectors. Whether you're spending $1,000 or $100,000, they've got a high-touch concierge service that will guide you through the entire process. You get a real human interaction, not some chatbot giving you the runaround.
And if you're selling, their auction platform guarantees a sale in days, not months. So whether you're adding or offloading, Bezel makes sure it's smooth sailing.
So next time you're eyeing that dream piece or looking to make room for a new one, check out Bezel. They've taken the hassle out of collecting so you can just enjoy the journey. But moving on.
Yes.
So they've got some more information.
Yes.
And this is really interesting. I mean, again, there are some things that stand out that aren't really surprises, right? So they've shared with us a graph, a breakdown, essentially, for what people are requesting versus what's been sold. No surprise in terms of watches that are requested. And when we say requested, Bezel has a service in which they can source watches for you. So if you go to the website and you find a model that you want, but there are no active listings, you can employ their concierge service and they can actually source a piece for you. And with a brand like Rolex, some of the bigger brands, pretty easy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a lot of difficulty there.
Yeah.
And so, no surprise, Rolex represents 37% of what's requested. Omega, again, coming through next, just behind Rolex at 12%.
Yes.
And the reason why that's very interesting is there was a report that came out last year. I think it was published by Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg. Well, a bunch of financial reporting outlets report this news, and it's the exports in watches. Rolex is always the largest export.
Yes.
Right? It's the most in demand. For the last 2 years, I believe, coming into has been Cartier.
Yes.
Cartier exports a lot of watches to the U.S. And, they're incredibly successful. Everywhere you look, I think Cartier is a premier, brand in the watch space today, which is impressive because it's not even the bulk of their business. Their business is really jewelry.
Yes.
It really is a small blip for them. But they come in second with exports. And so what's interesting there is to see that behind Omega is Cartier. And I think to continue off the last message, give credit where credit is due. Omega has had some really great years.
Yes.
In the last 2 and 3 years, putting out incredible product, putting out relevant product, doing some really great marketing, opening more stores, and delivering a world-class experience. I don't know very many people that go to an Omega boutique and have a poor experience.
Not really.
I think they do a really good job at inviting people into their world and giving them a luxury experience, which is so incredibly important for this brand because I think they went a long time without people viewing them as a luxury watch company when they've always been.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. To piggyback on that, I think, before, because I think you'll probably tap on who's next to Cartier. But I'll kind of keep it in comparison between kind of like the top three. Rolex is always going to have the lion's share. What I do like is that Omega now is not looked at as option two. They're more looked at as a first option to other brands. So like, while
it's like a gateway.
It's a gateway. So it's like, while I'm waiting for my Rolex, I am also interested in Omega timepieces. And that's why you see kind of second to that, they have the bigger share than everybody else that comes behind them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, I think it goes back to them just delivering great product because not only is it the watch you might get while you're on a waiting list for a Rolex, but we know many Rolex collectors that are going back after they get the Rolex and saying, "Hey, I want that new Omega Seamaster."
Yep.
Right? There just was a new release recently of the Seamaster, which everyone's going crazy about.
It's fire.
The black dial with the orange hand. It's pretty sick.
Yeah.
And so this went crazy in our group chat with collectors that we know have Patek, AP, Rolex, et cetera, et cetera. They're like, man, that's a hot watch. I want that watch. So it's kind of like the music industry. They have a saying where it's like a hit record can change everything.
Yes.
Omega has proven over and over again that good product can help you with your growth and your brand presence and strength. Mm-hmm. And they're showing it. Now, what's interesting is right behind Cartier is another brand that we're...
Your favorite.
I do love this brand. I love Tudor.
Yes.
I think Tudor is an incredible example of a brand that's been consistently delivering incredible product. It's undeniable that they make cool watches. Mm-hmm. And for a brand that used to be considered like the poor man's Rolex, they now today have their own identity. And their identity is a brand that makes robust tool watches, right? That are high quality, but also really fucking cool.
Yes.
And to see Tudor, a brand that when you walk into most ADs is readily available, coming in fourth place as most requested, I think says a lot about the product. Now, we understand that most of the watches they release are not trading above retail.
No.
That's okay. What's interesting is even though they might be trading flat or below, the demand hasn't decreased. The demand is still there.
Yeah.
And so what clients are coming to Bezel for and saying is like, hey, that's a great watch. If I could get it for $500 less, I'm all in.
Yes.
Right? And that's not a bad thing for a brand, no. I don't think, because what it means is that the product is being sold, and even if it's not being held on to for a long time, it is still finding its way back to the collecting community.
Yeah.
And that is a good thing.
Something what I do love about Tudor is that they actually have a healthy retention rate. Tudor watches usually retain between, I want to say, 80 and 90% of their value.
Sure.
If you can retain more than 75% of what you bought the watch for, I think you made off like a bandit.
You're doing all right.
And what's funny too, what I enjoy the most is the fact that Tudor and Cartier kind of share the same energy, but it's almost in reverse. Cartier timepieces are highly sought after on the vintage side, whereas Tudor is heavily sought after on the modern side.
Yes.
Where, if you look at the brands that follow with AP and Patek, where the reason why they land where they are is based on kind of value retention or like the entry of the barrier of entry.
Yeah, the pricing, they're expensive.
They're way too expensive.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people that are requesting those.
Buying it pre-owned or buying it brand new.
You're still going to spend an arm and a leg.
Very much so.
Yeah. I think the other interesting thing, so there's another graph that they've shared, and so we did sort of requests by brand, but they also have a sales by brand. And I think the interesting thing here, and I made a little notation of this, is Parmigiani. Mm-hmm. So Parmigiani is not featured at all in requests. Mm-hmm. However, they come up as a blip on the chart for sales by brand, making up 2% of total sales on Bezel for the first half of the year. Mm-hmm. That's huge for a brand like Parmigiani.
Yes.
What do you think is going on there?
I think there's a lot of influential people that are kind of pushing the brand forward. Parmigiani is a brand that is more, if you know, is really, really niche. It has a nice ring to it. So when you hear it, you're more intrigued.
It sounds luxury.
It sounds very luxury.
Parmigiani.
Yeah, right. It's very, very luxe. But when you think of the watch who's, I like to shout out, like, our good friend Zach Blass,
Sure.
who actually has the Tundra GMT.
He does the Tonda G. Yeah, it's a great watch.
The Tonda. Sorry,
And Zach
Tundra.
has really good taste in watches.
Really good taste in watches. This is also someone. I mean, shoot, I don't think I've ever seen a Rolex on his wrist.
No, he's owned a couple of Rolexes.
Which is, like, that's like in the past. Like now he's like Breguet, Piaget, Parmigiani, and we're talking high complication.
Yeah, I know he had a Breguet Perpetual. The Parmigiani is a GMT.
The GMT,
which is absolutely stunning. I actually got to try on his watch at Bucra Watch Week,
which is awesome. He's someone that is public facing. He's at the events. He's a public speaker. He's a spokesperson for Time and Tide in the US. Like, he's the guy. He's someone that's like, yo, this is hot, without having to say it's hot.
Yeah, and I think he got his secondhand as well. I think he purchased his pre-owned. And I think that's, there's a conversation to be had there too. I think obviously these companies they want their watches on wrists. And you want to be able to sell out through the door retail. They are, they're finding their way to collectors. And even if, you have a subset of people who are saying, listen, if I could save a little bit of money, I'll get it elsewhere instead of directly for the brand. That's not a bad thing because your watches are still on wrist. And the fact that it's selling without being requested tells me that it's still, to your point, very niche, but that the right people are finding their way to it. And I think that's also in part because they've been releasing some really great product as well. They released a new watch this week, as a matter of fact, the Toric Perpetual Calendar. And earlier this year, a few months ago, the PF Tonda Sport.
Yeah.
Both fantastic watches, beautiful watches, to your point, ooze luxury.
Yes.
And then I think, I would suspect that this is doing well with clients on Bezel who obviously this is not their first watch, but also this may not be their first purchase on a site like Bezel.
Yes.
Right? This is definitely these are people who are trying to go after like the if you know kind of pieces, like people who have experienced some of the bigger brands already and are moving into things that are a little more niche, a little more non-mainstream, under the radar, that the collecting community is aware of because of all the great material that they've been reading on the releases. So
yeah.
Shout out to Parmigiani.
Yeah, for sure. You know what's funny? You guys got to watch our live episode at Soho House. That was about 3-4 years ago.
It was a while ago.
And we were jacking
Parmigiani. Yeah, I love Parmigiani. I think it's a great brand.
Like, obviously, we don't want to be like, oh, we're the first, like, trying to pull like a Soulja Boy, like, mantra. But I think when we do speak of these brands and you do have people that have a high taste level and kind of see the future, it's great for outlets like a Wrist Check Pod, a Time and Tide, or any of those individuals, a Teddy, etc. Putting your ears to the streets is really where you want to be. And I think it kind of aligns with what we're seeing, in our next segment, right? For decades, kind of like the highest demand of what you're seeing in the decades, we're seeing like the 2010s is a big space. And that will make sense, right? Because we're still in the 2020s, right? So we can't really measure where that aligns, right? 2020s probably will take a bit into the 2010s. But I think, sure, Rolex is taking the lion's share, but you take other brands kind of like pulling into that. So that is the Parmigianis, that is, the Breguets, that is all of like those type of high complications. People are having an appetite for different brands, but they want the modern side of it.
Yeah, and I think that is part of what the community that Bezel has fostered through this site um, kind of goes after. Like, I think the way Bezel has even positioned himself as a brand, um, modern is prized. I don't believe very many vintage collectors are going to Bezel for vintage watches. But looking at this report, I think it does suggest some interesting things to your point.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have a graph that's a breakdown of most wanted release decades.
Yeah.
So these are watches from certain periods that are most requested. And so ranking at the top of the list with 39% is the 2010s.
Yeah.
The 2020s are just under that with 36%. So that shows you right there
Yeah.
that modern is prized.
Yeah.
The 2000s represent 13%, the 1990s,
No, 80s.
80s, 6%, 1990s right behind with 5%. So the fact that the 2010s, right, just 10 years ago represents a really large portion of what's being requested says a couple of things to me. It says that these are probably a lot of first-time watch buyers, right? Because they're looking, accessibility is a thing, right? I want to get into luxury watches. I might get a break if I go 10 years, 10 years back.
Yeah.
But what it also suggests is the idea that not just pre-owned, because you have to be comfortable with pre-owned to purchase on Bezel, but the idea of vintage is growing on people. That I don't mind reaching back maybe 10, 15 years to get an experience with a brand like Rolex, AP, Cartier, etc. And we know from being vintage watch guys ourselves that that market continues to grow. And to sort of see it seep into a marketplace like Bezel, I think says a lot about not only the collecting community, but what mainstream opinions may be right now on vintage or older watches.
Yeah, that I'm glad you brought that up too, because what's interesting, I think we've shared that like our favorite era in terms of like vintage watch collecting, etc., is usually like 90s, 80s.
Yes.
What's very cool about Bezel has put themselves in the position to be the authoritative voice for modern watches, because modern watches now have been, you can see that there's a huge appetite for it, and people don't really jump off the ledge for modern watches as much as they'd feel trusted in vintage.
Yeah.
But that also speaks to the authoritative voices that are in vintage, right? You have very, very, very knowledgeable and trusted people in those spaces when you think of Eric Wynn, Adam Golden, and so many other vintage dealers.
Yeah.
You know, you have Oliver and Clark, you have Craft and Taylor, and these are prolific people in that space, right? Like, you know, you have characters, you have a face in Cam, you have a face in Eric. Bezel doesn't really have like a single voice or a single person, which is great because it makes it universal. It doesn't make it biased. It's unbiased.
Sure.
You feel comfortable buying with those guys because they stand behind it, you know, as a collective.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, just from a business perspective, I think the position that Bezel's taken is that for them, because it is a volume game, it's a lot easier to manage not focusing on that. And the reason being for the point that you made, getting into decades earlier than the 1980s requires a bit of hand-holding and education.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you shouldn't just be pulling the trigger on vintage watches on websites.
No.
You can. I've done it.
Yeah.
But you really got to do your research, and you should have a person or a group of people that you can consult with before you make those types of moves. Because once you make them, if you make the wrong decision, it's very difficult to get out. It can be like buying a fake watch. Like, if you spend a lot of money on something and you don't realize what it is that you have, it could be compromised in various ways. It could be a fucking dog watch that just doesn't fucking work.
Yeah.
And then what do? Now you got to dump money into it and get it serviced and fixed and bring it up to speed. And there's a whole host of issues and challenges that could come along with that we won't get into. But in terms of appetite, I thought that this was very interesting because I do believe that the audience that Bezel has the attention of skews younger.
Yes.
And maybe more inexperienced in the world of watches.
Yes.
And so they're aware that vintage is something that is, I think for many of them maybe a little intimidating, and also just something that is maybe not within reach right now in terms of their knowledge base and what they want to focus on.
Yeah.
But that the appetite is still there.
Yes.
To get into something. And that it does make it more accessible. You can have these luxury experiences, especially with great brands that haven't really changed a lot in terms of design for core and iconic models, to get into something that's maybe released a little earlier, and you got your first or second luxury timepiece.
Yeah.
And you got a story with it.
Yes.
Right? Like now this is a neo vintage piece. If you really want to get into the hobby of watch collecting, you can do some research on it. You can tell stories, share it with your friends. And so it just makes it that much more richer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You want to take the next one?
Yeah. Going into case size. Something that we always champion is trying to watch on.
For sure.
Not necessarily just judging from what's on paper. But to your point, looking at, the data here, it would make sense why, a 41 millimeter would kind of be the prime size for that demographic, because, as we look at our previous data, you see that the 2010s, 2020s takes the lion's share of, the pieces that people are looking to purchase.
Yeah.
And those would be larger case size watches. So, at 21%, 41 millimeter takes the cake, but then right behind it at 18% is 40 millimeter.
Well, 40 and 42 are tied, which is interesting.
Yes, 40 and 42 is tied. And then when you think of 36 and 39, they're also tied. And anything south of 36 is definitely like on the lower end. So I think what you're finding is there's a universal mind in what people are collecting at like the bezel collector, the bezel shopper. It's pretty universal as what they're looking at, which will probably be a 41 millimeter sub, your 40 millimeter, Rolex GMT, or, your Speedmaster that's at 42, because, we know that the Speedmaster is number one, number two, always on like the hot list for watches purchased from Bezel.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing here too is that watches under 36 millimeters saw a 2% drop in request and a 3% drop in sales. And this kind of indicates that there may be a decline in demand for smaller sizes. Now, we went through the last 2 years where everyone kind of started skewing smaller. The conversation of gendering watches was a big deal. The idea of, challenging what became maybe a social norm in the watch world of wearing, larger watches was getting challenged, and guys were skewing smaller. And this is where we saw brands like Cartier really begin to shine. Even brands like JLC, the Reverso, became an icon.
Yes.
It's always been an icon, but it like really became and entered like the zeitgeist in terms of like mainstream watch culture and talk. where people are becoming aware of that. And this is a watch that, though lug to lug can be, quite large, it still has a very slim presence on the wrist. And a lot of people were, particularly guys, were getting more comfortable. It does sort of seem like a little bit that people are starting to go back, right? Whereas, like, I think about myself, for example. For a long time, I would say, 39 millimeter, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I can't wear anything bigger than a 42, and because the Speedmaster was my limit. Today, I have completely changed my opinion on that. I think a 39 still looks great.
Yes.
However, I would say that my range is much larger today. I feel comfortable wearing anything from a 34 up until like a 45.
Yeah.
Right?
Thanks to Autlins.
Thanks. Thank you, Autlins. And even AP, this idea of putting on a 44 miller offshore, I thought there was something I could never pull off. And then trying it on, I'm like, no, I like this. And I like being able to have that sort of full range. And I find myself today experimenting with larger watches again. And, I'm cool with a 34 millimeter. I had my Big Rose Tudor on last week, particularly for this reason. I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, let me toss that on and see how that feels again. And I was like, man, this feels great. I'm wearing a 36 millimeter today. It feels great on the wrist. But I do think that it's interesting. And maybe that's just a byproduct of more people coming into watches, right? Like, it might not necessarily be that people are all of a sudden changing their mind, but maybe there are just more people purchasing watches than there was over the last 2 years. Obviously, we know that's true.
Yes.
And that's where they feel comfortable. So you're seeing that scale sort of slide a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The next one I thought was interesting.
Yes. Case materials. I mean, very interesting, but I don't think we'd be too surprised that steel would, kind of trump all of the materials by a landslide. I mean, these guys, steel models are at 72% of, Bezel's kind of like requested sales. Second comes in at two-tone at 8%. Titanium is 6%. Rose gold is 4%. White gold is 2%. And yellow gold is at 2% as well. So, I mean, looking at this on like a scale, I mean, you could put all the other metals, on one side and steel on the other, and it just like topples, the whole kind of like the whole landscape. What I would attest this to is all of the data that we've been talking about from the very top, right? Like, the most requested watches will be steel model Rolex.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think that's certainly true.
Yes.
I mean, Rolex is going to take the cake.
Yes.
And I think the point that I want to make relates to that. Rolex makes over 1 million watches a year. I think just by sheer production volume.
Yes.
Right. Steel is always going to be, it's always going to take the cake just because they're going to exist more steel watches than anything else. What's really interesting is not so much that steel beats everything else by a landslide, but the data that they have showing the drop off in precious metal sales.
Yes.
So two-tone watches dropped from 10 to 9% in requests and saw an even sharper decline in sales from 11 to 8%. Rose gold held steady at 7%. With sales actually improving from 3 to 4%. That's interesting.
Yes.
And I do find myself looking at rose gold pieces a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yellow gold maintained a 6% request, but sales fell to just 2%. And white gold, in terms of requests, stayed at 5%, but sales dropped significantly from 5 to 2%.
Yes.
I think that there's a couple of things going on here. First, I'd like to tackle rose gold. I think rose gold is obviously growing in popularity.
Yes.
I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think more watch companies are experimenting with rose gold right now. It is sort of, I would argue, probably the most requested precious metal
Yes.
today. I think there are a lot of fans of rose gold. I think from a consumer's experience perspective, and considering just watch safety and culture, rose gold watches can sometimes look copper.
Yes.
They can look like, we know that they're precious metal and they look like precious metal, but from a distance they could look like something else. And I think that the idea of that makes people feel comfortable, because it's like, it gives you the feeling of yellow gold, but maybe a little more subdued,
Yeah.
a little more calm. It's not as loud.
It's very contemporary.
Same reason for white gold, right?
Yes.
I think white gold for the exact same reason.
Platinum.
Which is what platinum, which didn't make the list, but would be kind of the same thing. But with yellow gold in particular, and the sales drops, I think that has more to do with the economy and just uncertainty,
Yeah.
right? Like, we're moving into a space where I think production, even for a lot of these companies, are probably going to start to scale back. There was a whole situation with the tariffs. We were actually in Geneva when it was announced, and we saw people panicking.
People
and
turning
freaking
pale.
out. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, companies were talking about, like, we got to ship boatloads of watches today, because we don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow. And, though the tariffs didn't hit as hard as people had feared because they've been delayed, nonetheless, price increases did hit as a result of the news.
Yeah.
And we got to see some of that. I mean, even when I purchased my AP, I got it right before, I paid for it right before the news of the tariff broke. By the time I got back to the States, maybe a week or two just after that, AP increased their prices.
Yep.
Across the entire line. Rolex did the same thing. There were a number of smaller independent brands that had sent out notes to clients who had watches on order, like, hey, these things are going to land sometime in a month or two. There might be some price fluctuation. There's also price increases happening now because of the tariffs that hit China. And so these things are getting more expensive. And so I think you saw, just from a retail perspective, a lot of orders get canceled, people more hesitant to purchase, and that trickling into the pre-owned market, with people maybe opting to skip out on precious metal and maybe go with either a precious metal that's not as highly requested where you can save some money, or just keep it with steel.
Yeah. I definitely can agree to that. And it's great because also too, us covering this type of information and, being journalists or, having this talk show, right? Like, sure, we could be speaking from an experience and like anecdoting this information, but we're also consumers. Like, you feel it as a consumer. I feel it the same as a consumer. And having that behind the curtain experience in the watch industry, we also can give like a true and accurate, like, perspective on it, because we're experiencing it in real time just as much as our viewers and listeners are.
Yeah, and we're in the community. So we talk to the people talk to us. They tell us about their experiences. We know the retailers, we visit the shops, we go to the events. And so that's what I think is so interesting about Bezel doing these reports, because this is all just data collection, but it kind of reaffirms what I'm seeing and hearing on the ground level. And so it tells me some things about where the watch market is going. Now, the good thing is that in spite of any economic uncertainty, in spite of the changing trends, the industry is still growing. The marketplace is growing. There are more people buying watches today than they did a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and so on. With that, more access to information for new collectors, right? So you're seeing people, because of shows like this, publications like Hodinkee, Revolution, GMT, etc. More people have more access to. I mean, even Bezel. Bezel has a journal on their website where you can read sort of amazing articles about what's happening in the industry, not only from a data collection perspective, but from the perspective of other collectors and enthusiasts that they interview. And so, you can see the trends in real time. The idea that people who are maybe just now getting acquainted with the idea of watch collecting are finding interest in vintage, right? Which to me makes sense. I mean, if you finally come to the realization that you're okay with pre-owned, and you can go to a website like Bezel, vintage watches are an easier pill to swallow.
Yes.
You can kind of make your way there. I think that'll be interesting as Bezel continues to grow, to see how people start interacting with watches from decades maybe earlier than the 80s. If that community that's being cultivated on the website actually continues to like crate dig. So I'm looking forward to seeing stuff like that. I'm also, I'm hopeful in seeing that there's interest growing in other brands. Sure, Rolex is still beating everybody by, leaps and bounds. However, you are seeing growth in other brands, in interest in other brands. And I believe that's particularly happening with people who are looking for their first timepiece. And so that means they're getting acquainted with brands like Omega, with Tudor, that these are, and that's good at the retail level too, because as people experience these pre-owned watches, it's only natural that more people want to gravitate to getting their first watch that belonged to only them.
Yes.
And what are the brands that they're going to look for then?
Yes.
Rolex is still incredibly inaccessible.
Yes.
Even if you have the money, it's still a hard brand to get. We did a whole episode about it, talking about relationships. Everyone loved that. But it's still not just, it's not a brand that's readily available to everybody. So with the interest that you're seeing growing on marketplaces like Bezel, I'm certain that's going to translate, months from now, a year from now, and continuing at the retail level with people purchasing their first luxury timepiece.
Yes.
So
that's spot on too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's spot on too, because we speak about it being on both sides of the industry. We understand how much both sides need each other. What luxury does the retail side of the business have for a marketplace like Bezel to actually do the heavy lifting for them and to actually have their finger on the pulse and be able to report it back to the general public? Like, these guys don't have to do that.
They don't. It is very generous.
Which speaks to the power of that whole team and what they have there that's so special.
But also I think the key, I think the reason why they do it is it establishes trust.
Yes.
And the fact that they're willing to share that information, to me, means they stand behind their product. They know that there's little competition out there in terms of delivering the same experience. And we talked to Quaid about that. And for me, that was the most convincing thing, that our partnership was with the right people, because of how they looked at and prized the consumer experience, not just from a watch collector's perspective, but for the first time, someone might be pulling the trigger on a luxury timepiece. What should it feel like? How can we make them comfortable with the idea of purchasing a watch from someone they don't know? Those are a lot of big challenges that they solved.
Yes.
Right. And so, shouts out to them. I love the Bezel Report. We'll do more of these. I can't wait to see what the second half brings. And I look forward to the next report. For those watching and listening, this has been another episode of Risk Check Podcast. You guys know where to find us: riskcheckpod.com, superniche.com, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
The works.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week. Deuces.
Peace.